In the theater where I go, there is a family restroom, so it's just like a single.
Oh, those are good. Those are great. Yeah,
that's fine. I'll take it.
I
go
love
in there,
handicap
lock the
stalls.
door.
Handicap stalls are the best.
Has to be a handicap stall 100% of the time.
They're great.
You get that room. You can throw an elbow, if you need to.
You're a very complex man.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Shat on TV, True Detective, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit HBO series, True Detective. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And the King B.
Still waking up in the mornings with shaking hands.
This is our deep dive episode where we look back on this week's True Detective and provide our thoughts and analysis, plus the top listener emails for the week. This week's episode was entitled, If You Have Ghosts. Guys, what'd you think?
I don't want to sound like I'm being dramatic here, but I felt like it was an entirely different series. There was an elevation in just the overall craftsmanship of the episode. There was a different style to it. They actually, I think this is the first time they used voiceovers.
I believe so.
The way that they used the shots were unique. It wasn't just standard eye level. There was some interesting angles. And the episode had a sense of momentum. It feels like finally that we're actually moving towards something. We got a bunch of answers. Still got even some more questions. And then we finally now have Wayne and Roland in all three timelines working on the case. For me, by far the best episode of this season and probably one of my favorites of all three seasons.
Yeah, I don't think that's being dramatic at all, Big D. I agree that this is a turnaround for the series, which was starting to drag a little bit. This one was written and directed by Pizzolatto, and I was skeptical about his capabilities, but I think that he showed us all that even if he's sort of mimicking a lot of what we saw in episodes 1 and 2, he's elevated the show. I'm definitely on board, excited about the last 3 episodes of the season. And one of the things that I really noticed was what we would refer to as great shows or landmark shows like Westworld or Game of Thrones or even Buffy the Vampire Slayer. They would shift us from hating to loving a character. You introduce somebody in episode or season 1, episode 1, maybe as a protagonist, and they become a villain by season 3, or somebody that starts off as a villain, but you learn to love them eventually. But there are rare shows like Breaking Bad, and I think True Detective as well, that have the capability to make us hate and love the same character in equal measure at the same time. It's not going from hero to villain, but they are hero and villain. And this was encapsulated like from top to bottom in this cast, from Stephen Dorff in the porch scene, Scoot McNairy in the interrogation room, Carmen Ejogo in the Hayes home, Michael Greyeyes, the trash man in his suicide by cop scene, and of course Mahershala Ali overall. All of them were like, you saw their flaws, but also saw reasons to celebrate them. And I just thought they did so much in such a tight time frame. I was very impressed.
I think you guys are both right on the money. Wayne's showing us some real flaws. I mean, we're rooting for the guy. He's the hero of the show, but he's got some serious issues that make him a real unlikable person. I was kind of angry about episode 4, not really giving us, the shootout we expected. Episode 5, kind of satisfies that want, but then gives us so much more. It's like craving a really garbage junk food meal and saying, no, you don't get that. Here's a fine, nutritious feast for you to enjoy.
And in addition to all that, the spooky transitions are back. So I was super jazzed about that. Lights flickering out, jumping from time frame. Wayne Hayes seeing himself in the window, a ghost of himself. Much more effective than some of the other scenes where we saw hauntings that looked a little out of place or goofy.
There was also a vision within a vision where Hayes in 2015 is seeing himself in 1990, and then that vision is seeing himself earlier in the day. It was like we kept just going down the rabbit hole. A great episode. It made me angry. I was like, where the hell has this been?
So the big scene in episode 5, I think, where we could start off is the scene that we were all waiting for, and you guys alluded to it before, is the shootout, aka the Woodard Altercation. They kept it really brief. A lot of times when you see these shootout scenes like we saw in season 2, which I did enjoy from an action perspective, but man, the shootout in season 2 goes on for like 5 minutes. It's like, that's not what a shootout is like. They happen pretty damn quickly. And I thought they had a great job of pacing and effects in this very brief, very minute shootout.
I think there's more to it in this scene, even though it is an action scene. And when we're supposed to, be in shock by the violence and what's going on, there's more of an emotional battle in this scene that hit me. And it culminates in the final decision, which we'll get here to, where Hayes has to do the dirty work. But I don't think that Wayne misses the parallels between him and Woodard. If he hadn't joined the force, if he had just been that non-white guy loner in the town, plagued by those memories of war, he could easily be in Woodard's spot as a scapegoat for something. Without too many words, and just the two men in that room, they convey that really effectively.
I thought that the effects were fantastic. Big D, you and I are always complaining about Claymore blasts. I thought that they did a good job showing that there was a force of the blast, but not a giant fireball. Cars weren't getting flipped over. Things weren't catching fire. But just, you could see they did a great job depicting that there was going to be all this, shrapnel flying through the air, and you kind of saw a wave of something, and then bodies are just dropping left and right, bullet holes ripping through cars. Again, showing that it is not that safe to just be hiding behind, sheet metal when bullets are tearing through the air. And then, of course, from that range with a rifle, people could be incredibly deadly.
It was really exciting and interesting to note how often sides kind of switched in that first moment. The cops show up chasing the neighbors saying, "Hey, stop, get out of here. You guys are wrong." Quickly, they have to turn towards the house. But at the same point, I think one of the first or the second or third casualties is a cop shooting one of the neighbor guys, so it's cops shooting the white trash dudes, the white trash dudes shooting at cops. It was a mess all around.
I want to say, first of all, bravo for True Detective for not making Brett this completely innocent character. A lesser show, what they would have done is said, this guy was just doing his own thing, mind his own business. He's a scapegoat. People came after him. And they would either justify his actions and he went down like in a blaze of glory where he was just trying to defend himself, but the bad guys got him. Or there would be the sort of thing where he is, becomes a tragic character where they he's helpless and they take him out. In this case, yes, he's persecuted. Yes, it's not fair. But what the show did is it resisted the temptation to make him a martyr, because he openly admits to Wayne, he's like, I was within my rights until I shot that cop. He knew he was killing cops that had nothing to do with the men that were attacking his home. He just fucking wanted out. He wanted to be done with it. And then he made Wayne do it. So again, like I'm saying, equal measure where he could be a strict victim, but no, he actually takes matters in his own hands and becomes, in a way, a villain.
You talk about the actual choreography of the scene. Far too often in Hollywood and television and movies, these fight scenes are like well-oiled machines. People are shooting and moving and communicating, and it's graceful. That's not the way it happens. It is messy. This scene is a shit show. The cops come up, the rednecks turn around, people start shooting, dudes are falling down, the claymores going off. I don't even know how many people got shot, how many cops shot cops, the friendly fire. Just the fog and haze of that battle was great, the chaos and the confusion. But that headshot, I don't think I've ever seen a better multiple headshots on TV. And I'm not talking about Woodard. The one outside, Roland is talking to another cop and you see just the brain shoot out the back of his head. Bravo.
In the realm of details, I also like the crime scene photo that just has the red stain across the front yard. I saw that and I just go, oh, I know what that's all about.
As I'm watching the scene, I keep thinking to myself, where was that tripwire for the grenade? And then as they come around the backyard, you find out that was a great one too. And again, the way they shot it, credit to the directing and the cinematography. It was kind of up from like a tree view, so you could see where everybody was, but everybody didn't know where everybody was. So I thought that was really great.
Is it wrong that we're laughing at this? But when that goes off and the shrapnel like sprays all these hillbillies in the legs, they immediately drop and start like grabbing their legs.
You get to watch that torso tumble out across the porch.
Yeah.
They did a great job.
Great job.
But then we get to that scene between Wayne and Brett where they're in the house together. And again, the show immediately takes it back to, as you mentioned, Big D, the emotional aspect of what's going on. Wayne understands what he has to do, and I think Brett is putting him in a horrible position. But one of the things I really loved about the way they play that scene out too, again, this is vintage True Detective. That line of I'm going to count to 3 in my head, and then I'm going to turn around and I'm going to give you, full spray. And I love the fact that he even made Wayne do the counting, so you as the audience member are like, shit, does the count start now? Is this it? It's not an out loud, Hollywood count. This is a silent moment and you're just waiting for that trigger to get pulled. And it is tense.
I think that's one of the best Western movie tropes is when there are two guys that may have been friends or two guys that definitely understand each other. One has to kill the other, regrettably, and they both just are filled with this profound understanding. Unfortunately, Wayne, resents him for it, and that's going to bother him, I think, well out into the 90s and beyond. It is, that chemistry and understanding between those two is really palpable.
But isn't this a good twist on the trope? I don't remember seeing where, hey, I'm going to give a silent count. I'm not going to do it out loud. Because when you do it out loud, it's almost like 1, 2, 2.5, 2. He's like, I'm counting, Sarge. I'm counting.
Really don't want you to shoot me.
Well, you get it in Buster Scruggs a bit. You need a count?
Nah, sir.
As important as the shootout itself is the aftermath and all of the events that are set into motion by the killing of Brett Woodard. And we see Wayne at the hospital after Roland has been shot in the leg, and he's waiting for his partner to get out. And you see that there's a genuine care between the two men. Wayne is very, very concerned about his partner, much more than we may have expected from their tit-for-tat conversations in the car. And we see in the altercation that he's not bloodthirsty, but he's also fairly seasoned. He could rationalize the killing. As he says when Brett Woodard's kids show up in the 90s, he says, motherfucker made me carry his water. Just the idea that he does not feel completely guilty for killing Brett. He understands it's something he had to do.
I think he's also saying it didn't need to happen. And that's what I think upsets him the most. A lot of guys who go to war and who fight, they don't enjoy it. They're the most peaceful people. They've actually lived it. The people who are bloodthirsty are the ones who watch it on TV. I don't think he wants anything to end in violence. And it's not just that he was carrying the water for him. It was that there wasn't a more peaceful solution. Plus, the case now hits a dead end. Woodard was a good avenue to investigate. And for that to come to an end and it just fragments, he's just pissed that everything's going to shit.
So in previous episodes, we talked about who the murder of Will Purcell would have been pinned on. I think now we can conclusively say it was pinned on Brett Woodard, the trash man. And based on evidence that was found at the scene, Wayne believes that the backpack and the sweater that belonged to Will and Julie were planted at the scene. Do you guys buy that? Are we in agreement that that is the case?
Yeah, 100%.
Beyond that, you would even know that it was overseen, that planting of the evidence, by that red-haired officer who has since disappeared.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest reveals for me is we kind of wondered in that vision he has about the people we assume he's killed. And it's a bunch of Vietnamese soldiers, and there's the one guy. It looks very much like Harris James that Elisa said. He went missing after the Woodard altercation. He disappeared sometime around 1990, hadn't been seen since. That, coupled with the planting of the evidence, which I don't know why the hell it took him until 1990 to fix it. I saw that backpack and I was like, what? That survived that blast? I could buy the burn sweater, but it's obvious now that it's not just incompetence. There's some police tampering. When Wayne goes to find the fingerprints are missing, pair that up with the missing cop involved in it. We've got definitely some police involvement in the case.
You said, how did people not notice this stuff as far as the evidence being planted? It included the sweater that is like just burnt enough, and it's the only thing that's in the outdoor fireplace that is not completely burnt up. But definitely somebody wants us to believe, or wants the police to believe, that Julie is dead as well as Will. But it's like Wayne says, they wanted this case to be closed quickly, and people were very relieved to have closure. It makes the police department look good, makes the prosecutor look good. People in town can rest easy. That creepy guy, of course it was him. So I don't think anybody wanted to look any deeper into this other than the Woodard children themselves.
As soon as I saw them going in that through the ash, I'm like, flashbacks to Making a Murderer. I'm like, oh no, the fire pit. No, don't find the bones. You wonder how much this shit really happened in God only knows how long. Before forensics got a little bit better, but even now, planting evidence would be so easy.
So fast forward to 1990s, and you get the press conference there. So Tom Purcell is at this press conference. He's backed by Kent, at that point, the prosecutor going to be attorney general. And Tom is out there, pleading. He's just found out maybe his daughter is alive. He sees the photo that is taken from the screen grab that might be Julie Purcell at the Walgreens. And he's out there, he's crying. And then Alan shows up, the lawyer buddy. He shows up and he's got the Woodard children with him and he's challenging the conviction, makes this big grandstanding moment. And Kent immediately exits. He just bolts out of there. But I started asking myself, why has Tom been tipped off? The cops didn't tell him. So how does he know that there's something to be seen? He gets called and he's being asked to make a statement. And I thought about it and I was like, oh shit, Tom's being used. He's being used as part of a political move to basically quash the conviction challenge, right? The conversation, as soon as Julie's prints are found and that becomes public knowledge, is that, wait, maybe Brett didn't kill her. So that becomes the conversation. Should they overturn the conviction? They are able to flip that conversation by getting Tom out in front of the screen. If you know anything about my girl, now it's the hunt for Julie. Let's go find her. And the conviction is kind of pushed off. Wayne even tells him it's an inappropriate time to even be talking about overturning the conviction when this man is out there crying about his lost daughter.
Yeah, our man Scoot, that guy gets really beat on throughout this whole show. When's he going to get a break? I mean, I can't help but feel horrible for this guy. He is constantly brokenhearted, constantly on the verge of tears. You guys had a rough couple decades, that's for sure.
There's so much going on in this one scene. Acting over is fantastic, but I've heard some people make fun of Scoot's performance. To me, he seems like that distraught dad, completely believable. I don't find it over the top. You guys think he's hitting all the right notes?
I absolutely do. I mean, I don't have kids, and I don't really care about many human beings on this planet, but I mean, the guy was never the smartest guy. He certainly wasn't the most successful guy. Like, this guy's just never had great opportunities or breaks, and he's hanging on by a thread. I mean, this is how I imagine a person in that position would absolutely act, from everything down to the intonations of his voice.
Yeah, I think they did a great job of mixing the different dimensions of this character, taking all the things that we know about him, right? So he was a dad. He had these kids. The wife was running around on him, having a tough time at work, the drinking thing, and then getting out of drinking, sobriety, becoming religious. This is exactly how this person in real life would act.
I think they've also managed to show some growth. Remember, when the kids go missing, he has no coping skills. Nothing in his life has taught him to deal with this. He thinks it's a bright idea to go back to work. And when his coworkers are like, should you be here? He's like, what am I, a fucking joke? I'm a joke. That guy has gotten to the point now that he could stand in front of the cameras and make a passionate plea for his daughter. So even though he's still a train wreck, he's showing growth as a character.
So following Wayne from this scene, we get to see what his domestic life is with Amelia. And we get to see a lot about Amelia in this episode. And we really start to go beyond just guessing as to, is she a villain? Is she a calming influence on Wayne? Who's the bad guy in the relationship? I was watching this episode thinking, what is Amelia? Like, she doesn't seem like the type that would like murder a kid, but also there's something I just don't like about her. And Wayne says to her flat out in a prescriptive tone, I think you're a tourist. I think you're a voyeur. And that was like, I was like, yeah, he nailed it. Exactly. That's exactly what I don't like about her. Everybody else in this has skin in the game and she's just a tourist. She's just a voyeur. But it made me believe that she is not necessarily the big bad in season 3.
Yeah, that scene definitely kind of put us off that whole line that she might be a suspect. I've said it before, she's that prototype for every Goonie out there that fetishizes serial killers now and binge watches those Netflix true crime documentaries. I think a lot of the friction comes from Wayne and the notion that he's constantly bottling up a lot of these feelings and thoughts. The worst moments of his life are just fodder for excitement and entertainment for her. He's carrying that water for having to kill a man. And she's just fascinated. She wants to know more. She revels in it. It's the worst moments of his life are the best moments of hers. And there's going to going to create resentment.
Before we started to record, we were talking about their relationship, and our opinions differ greatly. I think Wayne is an asshole. He's aggressive. I don't know how anyone could stay married to him. My take on that hospital scene: she finds out in the news there's been a shooting. She shows up. She's going to be supportive. Holy shit, the guy that I'm in a relationship with could be dead, could be shot. I'm here. I'm emotionally trying to be connected. Are you okay? Is he okay? He just shoves her off. He just blows her off. What's that smell on you? I understand it's been a traumatic event and an experience. She's reacting normally to what someone who is sympathetic and caring would react to someone put in that situation. But you two guys seem to think she's out of line for showing up to the hospital for someone she cares about.
Saying somebody shouldn't be somewhere and saying they're out of line is completely different. She has no business being there, is what I said. And I stand by that. They're not at that point in the relationship, A, and B, the fact of the matter is that you have a person who was in a shootout with another person, had to kill them. They're both veterans. This might be the person that Wayne connects to the most in all the people in town, and he just had to kill him. His partner has been shot, is in the hospital, and you're coming by and talking to him, asking him questions, trying to touch him. I also would be like, get the fuck away from me. I need space right now.
I mean, in that moment, Wayne makes it clear he wants space from everyone. I think her motivations can be varied and still yield the same result. Maybe she's just fascinated and wants to know more about what's going on and shows up for that reason. Maybe she genuinely has feelings for him and she's concerned and worried. It can be both things. And at the same time, Wayne can just not want her there because he's not interested in being sympathized with. He's not interested in feeling vulnerable. He's fucking done sharing for the day. Ultimately, like, this event, I think, is the big impetus for most all of Wayne's troubles moving forward. Up to this point, he's been able to bottle everything up. This is the moment where a lot of these feelings are going to start to spill over into the rest of his life. And again, that whole accusation that she's a tourist, it runs true moving into the past and moving forward into the future as far as their relationship's concerned.
His facade is starting to crack. He used to be able to cover it up in public. You didn't get to see what was really going on. He would hold it until they were alone, and then he would lash into her. Here, he's drinking some wine. He doesn't have a problem in front of, even though it's his partner, but it's his partner's girlfriend / possible fiance in the future, the woman from the church. He doesn't hide his animosity towards her when he says, basically, we'll talk about this when we get home. You're out of line. And he starts questioning her. That facade of the good guy Wayne, you're starting to see what's behind it is actually not anything of the sort.
I mean, I've been in his shoes and he handled it a lot better than I would. I honestly would be like, I apologize. We're leaving right now. And I'd be like, let's go. And then have it out in the car or somewhere else, because they're just trying to have a dinner and she's asking about facts of the case that are confidential. Like, she's completely in the wrong.
Oh my God. Okay. I'm going to let you know a secret here. Things that are confidential in a work environment, your spouse, sometimes you talk about stuff. I can only imagine what it's like for you and your significant other to come home from work and to be like, hey, Gene, how was your day? Don't talk to me. I want to leave that at home. People who are in a relationship actually sometimes like to share things, and that includes their day. This case is their life. That's why the book is more about them than it is the case. And you want her to come home and just not open her mouth? She should just shut up. I think she's doing what a normal spouse would do. If I was married to a detective or dating a detective, I'd be like, hey, so what happened? Did you guys find anything out?
Yeah, it's different if your spouse wants to know what's going on versus your spouse is writing a book about the thing that you're doing and then keeps asking questions incessantly about it.
But the book's already done. The book's coming out. She even wanted to bring a copy.
I'll tell you, when he dropped the line that a gift shouldn't flatter the giver,
yeah,
I thought, oh, that's brutal. I mean, he is unnecessarily cruel. He could be a lot more gracious. He does not handle her foibles well.
Yeah, B.
he's not processing things.
Yeah.
He's not processing things well. While his gripes may be legitimate, it's very much a princess and a pea sort of situation here. That's, as I understand it, because I'll most likely die alone, that's just not how you stay in a happy marriage. Like, you don't get to just give them both barrels.
Yeah.
You baby steps.
Look at B, the voice of reason. Good work.
I'm going to put a bow on this by saying that Big D is married. King B and I are not. And this is why, because I would just be like, okay, this is a deal breaker for me. I'm out. And so Wayne is trying to, like, he's got the kids, he's got the wife, he's got to stick with it. I get it. And so when you're in that situation, you can't just walk away from the person. So you start to act out. And I've been through breakups where I looked forward and I said, where I am right now and where I'll be with this person in 5 years, I will be a horrible person to her in 5 years. I need to go because this is just going to get worse. It has been a criticism of True Detective where we're always seeing things through the men's perspective. I think that we do see more of Amelia revealed through Wayne's reading of the book finally. And he has that big moment where he's like, children should laugh. And then he's like, wait, the note said children should laugh. I hate watching a TV show where I know something before the character does. It's such an icky feeling. I'm just like, oh, man, what?
This was definitely, for me, the big misstep of this episode. As viewers, we were, I think, acutely aware of the note. And the big reveal for us is when Lucy says the line, but I don't think anyone read that as her being involved. I think they read it as she was aware of the note. She was echoing the sentiment out of grief or hysteria or just resignation that ultimately she feels responsible for the fate of her children. I mean, I assume, Big D, you got a kid. If your kid got hit by a bus, heaven forbid, you'd feel like you failed them somehow. You know what I mean? Or even as a grown woman, maybe she goes out and robs a bank. You feel you failed your kid. And I think that that's where that dialogue was coming from, is that just that resignation that she's a failure as a mother, as a care person. And she agrees with the note. Children should laugh. We weren't doing that. For that to be the big aha moment years later for old man Wayne it doesn't resonate at all. It carries no weight for me.
How do you two guys get this so wrong? Wayne is going through, his mental acuity is degraded to the point where he doesn't know where he's been. This is not a big aha moment. This is a revelation for a man who doesn't know what he did with his partner. He doesn't know anything. This isn't him breaking the case. This is him just coming up with something. He's putting two pieces together two puzzle pieces together that don't fit.
Right. And I said to King B over a delicious Kentucky Fried Chicken dinner tonight that I was like, he might have read this book 100 times and not even remember it. Like, he's like, I've never read this. And Henry's in the background going,
oh, hold on. I got a crazy. What happens if, he's got multiple copies of the book? What if at the end we see he pulls another book out and the entire book is highlighted, annotated? He's been going through the books over the last year, one by one, and each time he reads it, he forgets it. Okay, you guys didn't like that one? Fine, we'll shelve that.
For the listeners at home, the King Bee just had his mouth wide open and was staring at his screen. But no, I mean, again, I think what we're saying here isn't like we got it right or wrong, but rather the fact that if the show is presenting this as an aha moment, it's not one. If it's just trying to show us that Wayne has lost his grasp on things, that's one thing. But even if you rewind back to the initial scene between Lucy and Amelia, what we're saying is, like, she's one of the parents. She's seen the note. It's not weird for her to quote it directly. I didn't think it was odd at all.
I mean, there's so many things. We can assume that Amelia never knew about the note. We assume that Wayne never knew about Amelia's visit. There's a lot of information there that kind of leads it all together. So did we mention that it's possible that whole scene is a false memory of Wayne's, which I think would be extra weak, because that means that you'd have to set a precedent for that, which means that we'd have to have seen multiple scenes at this point that were false memories or mistaken recollections. I don't want the whole show to hinge on this moment, because ultimately there's too much ambiguity and it doesn't hit hard enough.
Not even a false memory of Wayne's. If our narrator for the show, right, if Wayne's memories are gone and the only thing we've got to base the entire past on is Amelia's book, and that's what we're seeing, in that case, Amelia could have been the one who wrote the note and then conjured up this scene, and it's all fictional anyway, right? That the mother actually never even said any of this. Lucy never said any of this. It's a mess. But I think that we can kind of push that all aside and chalk it up to the using Occam's razor and just say quite simply that it's not an aha moment. It's just Wayne rediscovering things that everybody already knew, which gets me back to my point. I don't like knowing what the characters don't know. On to Wild Hogs 2, the porch scene. So we've got old man Wayne and we got old man Roland, and they're ready to saddle up once again in 2015. What'd you guys think of this scene?
Just on the surface, I really enjoyed watching Wayne get out of the car, and his face is filled with doubt, and he's just give me a minute, and he's asking his son for information. I put myself in his shoes and imagine like having to ask my young son for information about one of like maybe my oldest confidant. That lack of confidence and that complete like almost fear for going and talking to this guy that he should absolutely be comfortable talking to. And Roland's sitting in there talking with his tiny dog and just comes out and kind of makes a joke and says, "Come on in, you're at the right place." And just that smile that flashes across Wayne's face, that even though he's completely unsure and can't remember anything, there's a part of him that just feels that this is right. Maybe on like a sort of primal level, he knows that this is a good place to be.
So I've said it plenty of times before. The way I gauge a performance is when I forget who the actor is. If it's someone I know, if I'm watching a Brad Pitt movie and I forget that's Brad Pitt, they embody the character. That's when I'm like, okay, it's pulled me into it. These two guys, Mahershala and Steven, this scene, they embody their 70-year-old selves. It's effortless. The conversation, it's heartfelt. There's some dark humor. The makeups and effects, they look like their older selves. It's so easy to do special effects to make an alien, things that we don't know what it looks like. But to make an older version of somebody who we're very familiar with is hard to do. And I found myself after the first 30 seconds of them sitting down talking that I had forgotten. I felt like I was watching older versions of them having this conversation. And that is so hard to do. You know how they always choose one scene to submit for Emmy consideration? I think it hits it out of the park for both of them. They pull it off. I felt like they were old men reminiscing, getting ready to saddle up that final time. And that's so hard to do.
It's like Vince Vaughn and Colin Farrell in the bar scene in season 2. Oh. But you're absolutely right, Big D. I realized that Roland is always diplomatic, always knows how to play the room, always kind of softens the mood or tries to calm people down. And this is the first time we see this other side of Roland. This is him not being diplomatic. And it is not who he is. He's trying hard to put up this wall, to be aggressive. And you realize that diplomacy is not just a personality trait for Roland, that it's part of his talent. It is his weapon. It's what he uses. And he's trying to, and then you see that his love for Wayne immediately melts him. That when he sees Wayne saying, I don't remember, and it changes. I mean, as a viewer, it changed the scene for me. I was like, fuck, like exposing himself that way. My eyes are scanning the screen, trying to figure out what it is that I'm missing. And then I realized that Stephen Dorff's got like that single tear coming down his cheek, and you're like, shit, you can see all the boundaries being redrawn. The whole situation changes and he goes into this care mode. I can't say that it's exactly real life, but it's something better than that. It's amazing fiction.
I'd whip your ass if I didn't think it'd kill you.
But aside from the direct conversation between Roland and Wayne on the porch, you also get a very important scene between Roland and Henry, Wayne's son, when they're inside. So Roland is trying to gauge how much Wayne really remembers about everything. And Henry says a really interesting thing. He says that, that basically it doesn't help to remind Wayne. And I took that as him saying that essentially you can tell him the facts and he'll just forget them. That really changes the way that we view Wayne as a character. So Wayne and Roland may have killed somebody and he doesn't even remember. He might not remember who it is.
May have.
I think the show wants us to believe that it's Tom. It looks like Tom's in trouble. Like, I think we're supposed to, as an audience, believe that he was lying, that he's impersonating the father, something like that. And the two men are kind of looking down on him as he's sitting there, and he looks pleadingly at Roland for help. Tom does. And I'm like, are we supposed to believe that Tom's the man they killed? I think we're in agreement that it's Harris James, Ginger Cop.
You're saying is it possible they killed one person? I'd go way beyond that. You don't like when we speculate on the podcast. Whatever has happened, whatever the bad things that they've done, that Roland says, you don't remember what we did. It was enough to change Roland's personality. Roland was outgoing. He was supportive. He liked people. He was helping Tom, it seemed, out of the goodness of his heart. To turn that man into something, he was never an outdoorsman. Now he's living outdoors. He's surrounded by these dogs. He's in solitude. He didn't have a family, even though he clearly wanted one. He cries and says, what wife and kids? I have nothing. Whatever they did was bad enough to fuck him up and change his entire personality and the trajectory of his life. And it parallels the kid when they go back and see what Freddie's life has become simply because of that one interview and the way they pushed him, that his life went off track. The exact same thing happened to Roland. So it has to be more than just one murder. They did some dark shit.
Well, I mean, you'll recall they did torture a pederast and have him sent back to jail. I know, but it's without, still outside the bounds of the law. Back to the interview scene, there's a real sinister, mean look from Roland towards Tom as they're playing the tape for him, as sort of like a searching, what did you do? What are you not telling us? I mean, he's really looking at Tom for something. I mean, I don't think that that's what's going to happen. I don't think they're responsible for Dan at the bottom of a quarry. Again, I'm going to pin it on the Ginger Cop, but something horrible's coming up.
B, we just did it. Look at Gene's head. It's going to explode. It's turned into the speculation cast. Look at him. Look at him there.
So we get the recording of a woman calling into the hotline, and both Roland and Wayne go in to listen to it, and then they have Tom come in, as we alluded to before. Let's go over the kind of what happened there, and what we think it all means.
Yeah, so they pull in Tom, and they pull him into an interrogation room to have him listen to the tape, because all the cops are watching him. They want to see his reaction to what's on the tape. It's not just, hey, we may have found your daughter. Julie calls the helpline, and we assume it's Julie. I think, Gene, we don't want to go too speculative here because we haven't, DNA tested it. We haven't had forensics out there comparing her voice, so we don't know. But we believe it's Julie calling the hotline, and she's repeatedly telling the police, make him leave me alone. The him being Tom. I know what he did. The man on TV is acting like my father, she says, before asking, where is Will?
Yeah, fuck me for thinking like a detective, guys. But I just look at it, I go, okay, you got a call from some woman, and they're like, oh, it must be Julie. I'm like, wait, whoa. There's nothing that she even says that would indicate that she has any special knowledge of Julie Purcell. It could be any wackadoo calling in. But anyway, the show chooses to show us, so we must think there's some significance to it. But there's so much we don't know about this person. It could be Julie. It could not. She could be brainwashed. She could not. And even if Tom isn't her real dad, we've already had that conversation, shown on the screen where the rumor is that Tom is not Julie's dad, that Lucy had a child with someone else. And so we don't know that Tom did anything wrong here. And I think that the show wants us to jump to the conclusion that he did something. And I'm just like, I don't see it.
Well, I think it's a little late in the game to add more moving parts to this story and the whodunit aspects of it. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, yeah, that's Julie. For what I'm going to believe, that has to be it. It would be ridiculous to just continually add more suspects and more avenues for them to have to chase down. We've only got 3 episodes left. So, I mean, they've really got to start narrowing stuff down.
That's spoken like a man who isn't a veteran of Westworld season 2.
Very true. We can go right up to the last episode. Definitely.
Yeah, you got me there.
I don't think as the audience that they want us to believe Tom did something, because we have knowledge that some of the information that Julie presents is factually incorrect. She says, where is Will? Whatever happened to Julie, she thinks, and she mentioned something like, we left Will, he was sleeping, he was resting. Someone has told her information that is factually inaccurate. She doesn't know Will's dead. She's still looking for him, according to the runaway. So it's logical to think that whoever put that information in her head, also put it in his head that Tom maybe abused her, that Tom had done something terrible. Tom wasn't her dad. That I think there's a hint at molestation. But, Julie, she's now saying her name is Mary July, and she references, or she was going by when she was living with that group of kids, she was the princess from the pink room, and that she was trying to find her brother. So we know now for a few years that she's been under this false impression that her brother was alive. So it's either brainwashing, that she was kidnapped, but she doesn't know the truth about many things that we know are factually wrong. I don't think she's crazy. I think she doesn't have her facts straight.
And it's reasonable to believe that when you think about the fact that she was taken when she was 10? I think back to what I remember from being 10 years old. I don't remember much before that. So if somebody had fed me facts for a decade, I would believe that reality much more than I did the first 10 years of my life, which I couldn't remember.
Yeah, and the worst part of that was watching poor Tom's face. Your daughter may be alive. There's a chance of reconnecting, of getting back with her. And then to have her openly accuse you of something in front of the police and make them question you. They ripped his heart out. They were about to maybe put it back in, and then they just threw it on the floor and started stepping on it. This poor dude. I feel for him.
Our man Scoot can't catch a break.
Crazy tinfoil theory. We'll go back to Hoyt. She was calling herself the princess in the pink room. I think she was with somebody who was very wealthy, who called her princess. And she maybe even had her own room that was decked out with princess gear, somebody who was taking care of her. That is the princess. So I think Hoyt took care of this girl for a while until she ran off. Tinfoil, that's it.
No, you're absolutely right. That's not tinfoil. That's how it happened. I mean, she had to be secluded for quite some time. They needed to hide her from people who were looking. So, I mean, she was really a prisoner in a pink room, most likely. She was fed lies and led to resent the things that she'd known up to that point. I wouldn't say brainwashed, but she's definitely been misinformed to the point where she just, her reality is a little bit different. I guess that's brainwashing.
Yeah. And Big D, you're not alone in that. We've actually gotten a few letters into the watch that we'll get to in a little bit that refer to Hoyt's role in all this and also the pink room. Before we get to that, just a couple miscellaneous new details that we figured out that might help people piece the puzzle together. One of the things that Wayne points out is that when they talk to Freddie, they don't get much new information from him, but he does mention they in reference to the abductors or killers with Will and Julie. So I think once again, between that and the Halloween ghosts that were spotted with the dolls, that we are definitely looking at least two people being involved in this. So it is now expanded to conspiracy rather than just a lone wackadoo.
Yeah, and then there was another fun Easter egg that thankfully we didn't get, Rust walking in as an expert in kidnapping and the occult. But if you paid attention there's a newspaper article on the laptop screen when Alyssa is reading to 2015 Wayne. And the article says, former state police officers stop alleged serial murderer. And underneath the headline, there's a black and white photo of Rust and Marty. So it's a call back to that reference we had in episode 2 with the crooked spiral. B, you were worried about them doing it in a heavy-handed, over-the-top way by having some kind of a cameo. Thankfully not. They did it in a real subtle way that I bet you a lot of people didn't even catch it.
And now the moment everyone's been waiting for, the watch. These are letters that were written in at hosts@shatontv.com from listeners. And the first one we have is from a new writer named Robert. Robert writes, so I'm 60% sure I have it all figured out. That's pretty sure, Robert. First, in 1980, at Will's funeral, Hayes and Roland speak to the parents of Tom. They tell them that they always suspected that Will may not have been his biological son before stopping and saying it wasn't the time for that. Fast forward to the call. Julie is clearly going by a new name and has been brainwashed by Will's biological father. Their mother set up the plan, but Will resisted, and his death was a complete mistake. His sister was told he was left, quote, resting to keep her from panicking. Woodard was an easy fall man for the murders. The actual father is well connected and respected. The father was the mother's boss from the grocery store. I'm guessing that's Hoyt Foods, who had deep connections and had everything covered up. The season will end with Hayes committing suicide after finally finishing the case. His last purpose before he begins to completely deteriorate. The gun was introduced in the very beginning, and it's going to play a role in the ending. And that's from Robert.
The basic framework there, it makes sense. I think there's going to be more to it than that, but I like the basic structure of his argument.
Yeah, so listener Sean Wilson also wrote in with this idea, and basically the point being is that Hoyt is in a position of power. Lucy works at Hoyt Foods, and maybe Hoyt was the one who got her pregnant. And then even involving like different Hoyt Foods henchmen could be pulling off like crimes, like the one-eyed guy and everything else. Like it could involve a whole conspiracy from Hoyt Foods. I don't think we've seen enough evidence to go that far. But it is, I do think that it's almost certain, I shouldn't say almost certain, but it is likely that Will is in fact not Julie's biological father.
Yeah, and just someone who's had difficulty having children. Before my wife and I were able to finally conceive through in vitro fertilization, after 6 attempts and 6 years, I started finding myself looking at people with lots of kids with animosity. I can only imagine that Hoyt, having lost a grandchild, it doesn't necessarily have to be his child or someone who's directly related to him. If you lose a child or a grandchild and you have an opportunity to maybe better the life of an employee who says, oh, my kids, my husband's doing this, and you can better them, I could see somebody who had that philanthropy going could try to step in and try to improve the kid's life without it being that they were involved in it from the beginning.
I mean, aren't they hiding the son of Robert Baratheon in a blacksmith shop for years due to something just similar to this?
Spoiler alert. No. All right. Thanks, Robert.
First you get the chicken plant, then you steal the children, then you have the power.
Thanks, Robert, for your letter. Next up, we have one from Nick. Nick writes in, did anyone notice that Detective Hayes' son, so Henry, acts suspiciously at the police station when his dad asks if he has seen the director girl from the documentary? Later in the episode, Hayes clearly notices 2 wine glasses at the director's hotel when he visits, only to have her say she was alone when he asks her if he was interrupting something. My guess is that Hayes' son is cheating on his wife with her, which will play a part later in the story, although I have no idea how I'll add to the story. Anyone else catch this? That's from Nick Naspeka.
I caught it. I think he was just trying to show her that he's not as inept and harmless as he seems, that his sense of observation and his police skills are still going. I don't think it was the son.
I don't know why, but I got the weird feeling, too, that there was something going on between Henry and Elisa.
There's a vibe there for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know. I fully expected, the camera to pan out after Wayne leaves, and, there's just 2 eyes from in the closet, dun, dun, dun. But Henry's, something's up with Henry. First of all, they're not going to spend the dollars on an actor of that caliber unless he's got some important role to play. And secondly, he does seem keenly, interested, but at least familiar with the director.
Maybe that's a real life thing. Aspiring documentarians go and shtup cops for info.
Oh my God. It's like Amelia and Wayne, wheels within wheels.
Dun, dun, dun.
Time is a flat circle. All right. Thanks, Nick, for your letter. Next is a regular. Ashley from the Dana Buckler Show writes in. And she says, early on, when reading her book, we hear that Amelia wrote that grief and madness are one and the same, a twisted circle where one eventually leads to the other. So much about True Detective in this season are about grief, about the madness it engenders in those that allow themselves to feel it. Our eyes this season, Wayne, is grieving throughout every episode. He grieves over the ghosts of his past, his wife, the loss of the relationship with his daughter, his regrets, but most of all, he grieves over his loss of memory, the sanity he once possessed when he could remember his life. That is perhaps the biggest ghost of all hanging over season 3. The fact that we are all haunted by our memories, our regrets, but the true horror, the true ghost is when we know the regrets and memories are there, but we can't access them to grieve. When we can't remember enough to remember what we had, or more specifically, and she references the title of the episode, If You Have Ghosts, and relates it to a Rocky Erickson and the Aliens song by the same title that says, because we have ghosts, we have everything. So Ashley writes, instead, the dementia has not only taken away Wayne's memories, it has stripped him from the knowledge that he had good, that he had something worth having. Instead, he knows he had something, he lived some life, but the grief gives way to madness and traps him there because he can't remember enough to forgive himself, to move on, and to close the case on his own life, much less that of Julie Purcell. That's why he hasn't used the gun from episode 1. He's waiting for the closure that maybe won't ever be able to come. I think we'll continue to see Pizzolatto play with this idea of ghosts and haunting as we go. And that comes from Ash Schlafly.
I think it'll be interesting if in the end, Wayne discovers who he truly was, and it isn't the way he remembers himself. I don't think he's going to come out of this clean in any way. I think he's going to be surprised by what he finds. And you also have to remember, it's not just that he wants a resolution here. The chase might be what's keeping him alive. He needs a purpose. He has spent his whole life, with a purpose, whether it was in the war, whether it was as a detective. And maybe closure would be, if he closed it actually finally, that would be impetus to pick up the gun and end it.
I'm just fascinated by how many people want Wayne to shoot himself. Like, are people going to be disappointed if season 3 ends with Wayne still alive?
Oh, I think he's going to be dead.
Well, I mean, he's old. He's probably going to be dead, but...
What are we going to say? We're going to like jump another 15 years ahead?
I'm just saying anybody who perpetrated this crime is probably long gone by now. Like, that's going to be kind of the downside to all of it. They're like, oh, we solved it. It was Dan all along. Well, he's dead. Oh, it was Hoyt. Well, he's dead too.
Unless they're old men sitting on a porch drinking. Dun, dun, dun.
All right. Thanks, Ashley, for your email. Next up, we have one from Kenny. Kenny writes in, my dad was a Vietnam War vet, was in a platoon with several guys, his actual brother as well. And he, of course, saw actual time over there, suffered from obvious PTSD, very emotionally confusing, especially looking from my point of view as a teen. He would act a lot like Wayne does in the show, where all of a sudden he's yelling and angry about something that was just very small or not really important. Mood swings that seemed like he was always on the edge. And the sad part is my dad passed away 3 years ago, and I'm not a teen anymore. I'm obviously an adult, and I have a young child of my own. So perspective being what it is, I now understand what my dad must have been going through all those years. And I wish I understood before, but that's not the point of this message. The point is Wayne and Amelia is fairly comparable to my mom and dad. And it's so weird that I didn't identify it before, but the relationship makes so much more sense to me now. I noticed the similarities between my dad and Wayne either after episode 2 or 3. I think it's pretty breathtaking that Marsha Lee and Pizzolatto have been able to translate that emotion and distress to the screen. Think back to even 10 to 15 years ago, most doctors working in the VA and hospitals weren't even able to treat PTSD because most fail to understand how things in the brain work. So kudos to this show for getting that right. If anyone reading this from the watch is themselves military or had parents that served, thanks to those brave men and women who did, thanks to Big D as well. Or even if you didn't serve or your mom or dad has suffered some real trauma that they act like how Wayne is portrayed, I know it's difficult to understand why they're being like that to you, because likely they don't mean to do those things, and there is help for people like that. Go find a therapist who will help you understand more and how you can better your own end. And that comes from Kenny P., also Kenny Dukeman.
Yeah, Kenny, great email, great thoughts. This is why I think we read the emails, because you've caused me to walk it back. Everything I said previously about the relationship, about him being an asshole. He is an asshole, but I understand the place it's coming from. I feel stupid for what I said earlier. Kenny, I think you're correct. His reactions are realistic, and I think I need to kind of take that into account.
Well, again, it's one of those things where it can be more than just one thing. Yeah, he is a bad person, but it's not for no reason. So he is a sympathetic person at the same time.
Yeah, and generally my rule goes with people who have seen shit and been in situations that are legit, they don't talk about it. Yeah, I've had some friends, fathers who were in Vietnam, and I would never wish jungle warfare on anybody. And the ones who would give you the least information, those are the ones that really went through some shit. The people who actually think they portray themselves as Rambo and they try to talk about what I saw, it's not genuine. And the fact that we've never really heard Hayes share anything other than basically what he did tells you he probably had some real bad experiences.
Before we get too serious about this, I also got to point out that Kenny added a little piece of Shat tinfoil on the tail end of his email that basically said Roland is gay and was in the closet in the 80s and 90s and the whole season up until this point. Now, at first I thought, all right, Kenny, you're bonkers. But I went back and kind of thought about it for a while. And I said, okay, there's a little bit of evidence for this. And I think the King Bee mentioned this, during the scene where Tom and Roland pray together. But you do get a few snippets of evidence that could be construed as being evidence that Roland might be gay. and it's stuff that you mentioned, Big D, before, much more eloquently and with much more rationale. But we could look at the facts of his life a little bit differently. He never married. He never had children. During the marriage conversation, when he's been with his girlfriend for a long time in the 90s, like he is also just like, it's not really in the cards for me. He understands keenly what it is to be a minority. Like he seems to have this understanding of being the underdog. And he also seems more emotionally aware than other men in this series, right? That he seems to be more diplomatic, more aware of what people are going on, which is not to say that all homosexuals are like that, but rather to say that in this Arkansas 1980s, 1990s era, that he seems to stand apart for some reason. That could be the rationale behind it. And then on the porch scene, he also says that he doesn't want to hear Tom's name, or it might be Dan's name. He says it after both names are mentioned by Wayne. And look, I'm fine if the show doesn't address it. I'm not saying that Roland is gay, but I'm saying, Kenny might not be crazy.
I like one of the pieces of evidence you said is that he didn't want to have kids. Does that make like 35, 40% of my friends? Does that make Roger gay because he doesn't want to have kids?
I mean, everybody's a little gay, right? Back to Roland, the guy, like you mentioned, Gene, he shows a lot of sensitivity. He's got that soft spot for the underdog and the vulnerable. There's a weirdly great amount of tenderness and sympathy coming out of this whore banging, rat shooting, beat 'em up cop that we met in episode 1.
Possibly, but I think you're crazy. I think he's just a sensitive, self-aware guy who doesn't want to have kids,
who bangs whores and shoots rats.
So to sum it up, Kenny, Big D thanks you for changing his perspective and also thinks you're crazy. And finally, we have a watch email from Bailey, who writes in, I wanted to take a minute to thank you guys for never giving out information ahead of time. King B didn't even slip up and give anything away after seeing the first 2 episodes ahead of time. His tongue must still hurt from all the times he had to bite it. To think that most weeks you all have a day to watch that only 2 days to record is amazing. Big shout out to the great work that you do, especially in such a limited time frame. As far as the show goes, I feel that your voicemail from California last week was pretty spot on, or maybe it was just so thoughtfully crafted, I've now begun to cling to it as truth. If it turns out Amelia was not in on it, my money is on the old lady who makes the dolls. This season, the camera seems to linger in a really specific way when the audience might be getting a clue that a character is not telling the truth. Think of how it hung on Wayne's son's face when he was saying that he had not seen the documentary filmmaker since she criticized the investigation. I feel that the camera work during the scene with the lady who makes the dolls was similar. I also think she looks a lot like the man who lives in the farmhouse that is not on any maps. I can't explain why, but I get the feeling that they are married or even brother and sister. Anyway, just my random opinion. I promise I did not listen to the other podcast. So glad you guys decided to take on True Detective. Keep up the good work, Bailey.
Bailey, I appreciate it. Thank you. The amount of work that goes in these podcasts, I don't think people have any concept. Doing this and the movies, simultaneously, it eats up an entire week. But we do it because we love it. So it's nice to know people appreciate it. So thank you very much. And thank you for wearing tinfoil too. I like that you've come down the crazy hole with me.
Speaking of crazy holes, if the king bee's tongue hurts, it's not from biting it. There are various other activities that would put his tongue in peril. He eats butts. All right. That wraps it up. Jeez. All right. All right. That concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV True Detective. If you'd like to get your email into the watch, please email us at hosts@shatontv.com. Also, remember that we do not have the time to read every single email that we get, or even read the emails that we do get in their entirety. So all of them have been truncated for length. So if you'd like to read them in their entirety, you can go to shatontv.com, go to the watch section and read them in all their glory.
And when Gene says we don't have time to read them, he means read them on the cast. It's not like you send them in and we go, oh, that's too long, I'm not going to read that. Just on the cast. So you send it in, we read it. So don't stop doing it. Keep sending them, kids.
All right, that concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. On Facebook, search for Shat on TV Podcast. The website is shatontv.com. Again, if you'd like to email us, hosts@shatontv.com. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, the King Bee, Carrie Gross, and Roger Roper, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for episode 6 of True Detective.